And because helicopters are higher risk than other types of
Yeah, well,
flying.
I'm also a search and rescue pilot, and yes, according to the figures, the accident rates in helicopters in the different sectors that we operate are much higher than the rates that are in the fixed wing.
So obviously, safety oversight, regulation is a very important area, particularly when it comes to high-risk aviation like helicopter.
Yeah, well, in fact, aviation is a very high regulated sector. Probably the only one could be the pharmaceutical industry, but we have a high level of regulations. But in some fields, we have that lack of regulations that we have to look at it.
So search and rescue differs from other aviation operations.
Mm-hmm.
So explain why safety protocols are so crucial to search and rescue, and explain how does it differ from other aviation operations.
Well, we have to bear in mind that search and rescue operations are very unique in the type of the missions that we perform. We have to fly, well, the mission itself is a very pressure mission because if someone is in danger, and probably we are the only way that we can take that person out of the danger. So that's the pressure of the mission, like other helicopter missions. But we do it also in very hostile environments with meteorological conditions. When the people do not fly, we might go to fly. So rough seas, low visibility, night operations without any reference, very far away from coast. So if you do not make the calculations properly, you will end up in a problem. So that's why we have to stick with a very thorough SOPs and procedures in order to preserve ourselves and to obtain a acceptable level of safety.
Okay, so you had in Spain there was a tragedy with search and rescue in recent years. Tell me about that.
Yeah, unfortunately in Spain we have, in 2010 we have a fatal accident, a helicopter, search and rescue helicopter. And we lost 3 lives there. It was a training flight, and that was a turning point for us. In that moment, the Spanish Civil Aviation Authority, AESA, recognized and decided that it has to boost up a regulation, a framework, to create a framework to regulate search and rescue and firefighting operations, which is outside the scope of AESA. So in 2014, we published, I say we published because the Pilots Association was involved in this project as well. So we published a royal decree which regulates search and rescue and firefighting operations in Spain. So it's quite unique across Europe.
Yes, so explain that. Is it the only country in Europe, to your knowledge, that has put this in place? Can you just state that?
Yeah, as far as I know, Spain is the only country that has the own framework and Harlow put in place for search and rescue operations. Regulation. We heard that in many countries in Europe you have guidance material, acceptable means or best practice, but it's not a Harlow. It's not a. In Spain, as far as I know, in Spain is the only country that the national authority provides the operators and crews with a regulation which regulates search and rescue operations. It's the only country we have it.
As in, this is the only country where it is legally binding. There's legal.
Yeah, there's legal requirements. There has minimum requirements for crews, for aircrafts, for training purposes. It gives you a good framework to work with.
And what happens everywhere else?
It's a very good question because formerly search and rescue was mainly done by militaries. In fact, in Europe, France, Italy, Germany, many countries, Portugal, are run by military. Air Force, Navy, even Army. And there's some countries, like the United States, for example, there's a paramilitary with the Coast Guard. But in Ireland, in Spain, in some other countries, like now in the UK, now the search and rescue services are provided by civil operators. That makes a little bit tricky thing.
Why does the fact that civil companies, commercial companies in some cases now, run search and rescue in some countries, why is that tricky?
Well, in fact, many countries decided because to use the resources from the army was so expensive, so they decided to subcontract to the civil operations. But civil operations has to rely on the European Safety Agency, which is in Cologne, that agency. But in the reglement of that agency, in the first article, they say that search and rescue operations shall be considered state operations. So, European Safety Agency do not have any regulatory oversight or regulatory power to put that reglement. So the European Safety Agency regulates all operations, but not search and rescue, because it was considered as a state operation. So the European Safety Agency will not regulate that type of mission. It's going to be released the responsibility to the national authorities.
But and then I take that one step further. What does that mean then? Because like our search and rescue will say that the Civil Aviation Authority comes in, the Irish Aviation Authority comes in and audits them, audits their training, their maintenance, their engineering departments. Is that not exactly what would happen if they were being regulated by the European Safety Agency?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you have a regulation framework done by the European agency or the national authority, then you have a common playground for all the actors of the stakeholders, pilots, operators and authorities to establish rules and to fulfill with the rules. But once you have a guiding material or any kind of less regulated environment, then it's become to the responsibility of the operators and the civil aviation authorities to see and to check what you're doing and what you're not. So that's why it's so important that that big regulation body like the European agency take over some kind of operations. Aviation industry is a very regulated industry, but there is some operations like search and rescue or firefighting that is not regulated under the European Safety Agency. So, which is the biggest organization to provide laws in the aeronautical sector. So search and rescue is not under the European Safety Agency umbrella.
And it's also technically not under the Irish Aviation Authority then?
Yeah, well, it is considered a state operation, search and rescue, so it becomes to each member state to regulate or not that type of activity.
The state, the Department of Transport in Ireland, does not have a search and rescue inspectorate. It doesn't have anybody within its remit that has this expertise. So what happens in that scenario?
Right now, in other countries, we have, or in Spain, we have the civil aviation who take over all the responsibilities in order to provide the oversight of that operation. In other countries, if you don't have an oversight, or you have only aeronautical oversight part of the mission, then you're not totally covered by the regulation.
There is holes basically in the regulation because of this state versus civil operation.
Yeah, I can tell as we read in Ireland that you have some kind of oversight in terms of aeronautical speaking, like manuals, training requirements, or something like that. But when it becomes a real mission, then that who is the responsible of that is a little bit diffuse.
In terms of, so you had this tragic accident, you lost 3 colleagues, and this incident kind of was a wake-up call for Spain.
Yeah, that was unfortunately after that accident. We realized, all the stakeholders, that we need to have a regulation framework, and that accident became a turning point for us. So we decided to create and to start building up a regulation framework for all the stakeholders. And in 2014, it was a royal decree. It was published in order to address all the issues that we have in the search and rescue missions.
And just because we don't have royal decrees in Ireland, that is legislation.
Yes, legislation, yeah.
Could that not be used as a template for all search and rescue operations around Europe?
Absolutely. In fact, in European COVID Association, we have distributed this document as a template for any other organizations or national authorities who would be willing to implement some rules. So it's there. It's absolutely free.
Have other authorities, other civil aviation authorities or countries?
I know that our Holland colleagues are trying to encourage their national authorities to look at the document and to try to implement it as well, because Holland is another country that is transitioning from military provider to a civil provider.
In terms of that document, like what is in that has gives you more comfort, gives you more protection as a search and rescue crew member?
Yeah, of course, as all laws, not all the people are very happy with that, because it states figures and numbers that probably sometimes do not fit, but at least we all know what the rules are. So they establish from minimum requirements for the crews to be engaged in that type of operations, to minimum meteorological conditions, to training requirements, rest periods, equipment in the aircraft. So it's we have a lot of work to do now, because we are doing a revision of that law, but it's a good starting point.
And in terms of the inspection, do you have a dedicated search and rescue inspectorate? Do you have expertise at that level? Because it's, as you say, it's a very specific type of operation.
Not all the countries do have the resources to have a specific search and rescue inspector. In Spain, some of the inspectors performed that role many years ago. I cannot tell about Ireland, but as far as we know, there is not any specific search and rescue inspectorate dedicated to that. And
tell me why it would be good to have that expertise?
I mean, if you have to approve a manual, you must need to know what is written and if this is current or not, is not applicable. So this is quite obvious that you need to have the expertise in order to approve an operation.
The squid reports that we showed you, what's your first reaction to that these reports going back to that length of time did not obviously make a difference, because we know that issue was only solved in the last few months?
It was a little bit disappointing, but not surprising. I mean, in the aviation industry, we have examples, a lot of examples about accidents that in the past are exactly being repeated again and again, because some measures or the barriers wasn't put in place.
The fact that we can see from the squids now that this was an issue that pilots were worried about for many years, and yet it was not addressed. And these squids were raised, and then they were closed as if the issue was solved. But obviously there was no modification done until post the accident. So the pilots the crews crew members that I've been able to speak to are very disappointed that they were being sent out wearing these life vests set up in this way, when there was an awareness at some levels at least that they may not function.
After seeing these pictures, of course, is disappointing for us, but not surprising. I mean, once you have an issue came up in the safety management system, the company, what they have to do is to analyze that issue and become with a barrier, but that outcome could be to nothing, and you can close it, because in terms of probability and severity, when you do the analysis of that issue, you can come up with this is a good acceptable level of safety.
So if a crew member or a CAC employee said to me, we understood that crews were being sent out with the best possible equipment, that's actually not the case. It's not the best possible equipment. It's an acceptable level of safety on the equipment.
I cannot say if it's the best possible or not. I mean, there's life beds that can fulfill different type of missions, and you are the one as an operator who decides which type of equipment you provide to the crews. Probably, as you're saying, as you just told me, probably that type of life beds wasn't the best available solution. But on the other hand, you have another protection measures like dry survival equipment, helmets, or you name it. So overall, you can say that you have an acceptable level of safety.
But I think people watching this will be shocked to hear that they were placing the antenna in a way that was not in line with manufacturers' instructions, manufacturers' guidelines, that pilots were aware that they were going to be under the water and therefore not able to send a signal when those life jackets were inflated. I think people will be shocked that that information was known and was sent up the line to management, and that it was considered okay to allow pilots to continue to use those life jackets in that way.
Once you receive a safety management issue reported by the crews, then you have to analyze and study the case, and you came up with the best possible solution. And sometimes, even if we don't like it, the outcome or the best answer is keep going with this equipment.
And as a pilot yourself, a search and rescue pilot,
Yep.
how do you feel about that?
As you can understand, I would like to have the best state-of-the-art equipment for all my flights. Nevertheless, it's also an economical, financial decision to provide the crews, and it has to be an investment in that. And as far as we know, now the operator decided to change the life vest to provide higher levels of safety to the crews.
The fact that it was now been changed, is that not an acknowledgement that it should have been changed 6 years ago when it was first raised?
Or not? Because again, you have a lot of possibilities to equip your crews.
Do you think, sorry, I hear what you're saying, and this is the current thing, and there is this analysis done, but do you think that there should be tougher regulations to ensure that if an issue that is so basic as that?
Yeah, we have a lot of cases in the aviation industry that if we have learned from previous accidents, probably we can have different outcomes. In the case of JK 5022, 10 years prior to that accident here in Spain, it was exactly the same accident in the United States, exactly the same. And the NTSB released some recommendations that wasn't fulfilled for national authorities and operators. And we have the same outcome 10 years that we had 10 years. So we need a tougher regulation or a law in order to be as much protected as we can. That is the final objectives of the European Cockpit Association.
And in terms of just a specific thing, I asked you, like who would approve that life vest, the life jacket, that was set up in that way, that was against the manufacturer's guidelines from the antenna manufacturer? Who decides that that's okay for search and rescue pilots to wear that?
When we talk about maritime organizations, there is the International Maritime Organization, IMO, which in the chapter SOLAS, which is a regulation, establishes exactly what a life vest should be and what all the equipment you have to be on a vessel. If you come to the aeronautical, it's EASA, the one who will release the certification specifications, for example, for the life jackets of the passengers. But when we go to the crews, there is not any specific regulation about how a life vest from a crew member should be. You have some guidance, but you don't have specific rules that you have to fulfill.
So this seems to be the problem everywhere then, is that there's guidance, there's recommendations, but there is a wide space within that for, and when you have search and rescue run by commercial operators who have business models, they have to make business decisions.
Yeah, actually I can tell that there is not the exact live best whereby search and rescue crews across Europe. Not live best, not survival suits, because it's going to depend on your geographical area, on your environment. I know search and rescue pilot in Australia wear shorts because there's 20 degrees temperature or 29 degrees water temperatures, and they have to have shark repellent that we don't have it in Spain. So it's a very, very difficult issue to address in one specific area.
But to go back to our point, at the moment these issues are left to discussions between the civil aviation bodies and the thing. That there isn't the kind of legislation anywhere else that you have in Spain now, which at least gives you some protection.
Part of the International Federation of Pilots, we are creating as well, for many years from now, a position papers telling or trying to encourage ICAO, International Civil Aviation Authority, and member states and EASA and stakeholders how we consider a life vest or survival equipment must be.
Yeah, what's your response when you see how detailed the knowledge about this was going back so many years?
Frustrating, concerning, across the SAR community, worldwide. I mean, because we are facing similar issues in many SAR countries, in many search operations. So for us, it is something that it has to be addressed in a regulation. For us, that is very concerning for the search and rescue community, because we are facing worldwide very similar issues that you have already suffered from. So, as a European Cockpit Association, we are encouraging legislators to create and develop more regulation framework for us.
Okay, and you say it's very concerning and that it's a European-wide. When you say it's a European-wide issue, exactly describe the issue. The issue being that your crew members are exposed to risk that they shouldn't be. Is that?
Again, search and rescue is a risky operation, and we have to provide our crews flying on those missions with the best level of safety as possible. With equipment, it doesn't matter how much it costs, it has to fulfill the needs of that cruise. And the only way, or one of the ways to achieve that, is because of a strong regulatory framework.
Has the fact that the practice of outsourcing search and rescue to private commercial companies, has that exacerbated, made the problem, the issues worse or exposed?
No, I don't believe so, because many of the life vests that we use right now is the same one are used by the militaries. And the only thing that I think is even more, I think that even if you come to the civilian world and if you have a proper regulation framework, then you will be a little bit more protected and oversighted than, for example, for a military that they don't have to reply to anybody.
So what you're saying is that CHC Ireland, even though they were aware of this for 6 years, they're not going to get into trouble for this? Is that what you're telling me? That this is they're not liable for this? They're not required to change, to respond to those safety hazard documents by changing their equipment?
Bear in mind that we're talking about a preliminary accident report, and as a European Cockpit Association, we cannot say, because it's not in a preliminary report, and you have to bear in mind that the accident investigation is only to determine the causes and in order to avoid future accidents. We are not seeking any kind of liability. There is another type of investigation that has to be done by lawyers and technicals. as a pilot association, and as an accident report in the International Aviation Authority, the sole purposes of the accident investigation is to find the causes in order to prevent future accidents, not to blame nobody.
Okay, so what you're saying is that they would not be required to change the life jacket.
Well, I haven't done the the analysis, but as a safety, I was engaged in safety management systems. What you have to do when you have an issue is to analyze it, and to become or to try to establish a mitigation barriers if it's needed. The only thing that you, as an operator or as a SMS runner or SMS put in place, you need to analyze the event. But I probably don't like the answer or the results of the analysis as a pilot. Probably I will not like it. Then I have another ways to report it again, or trying to put some other situations. But the obligation of the operator is to analyze the events. But the response to those analysis, probably I don't like it as a pilot. But in a legal way, are totally correct.
But what role does the regulator have then in those scenarios? If crews are unhappy with the response to safety concerns they have raised,
Mm-hmm.
who do they turn to?
That's a very good one. If you don't have a framework who determines who is the responsibility of each issue, then it's very difficult to say, hey, where I go to raise my hand. I can go to court, I can go to where? If I don't have a national authority or a national regulation, then it's a little bit gray area. I probably don't like the outcomes of the analysis run by the company. But then the only thing I can do is to keep reporting things, to keep maintaining the SMS alive. And again, if I'm the authority and I read the analysis and I'm 747 pilot, which I've never flew with life vest or something, it probably sounds very good for me, like what I've read in the analysis. So there's not real problem for them.
So what you're saying is that without a regulation, without legislation, hard regulation,
Mm-hmm.
legislation, that there are issues that safety concerns that are raised by pilots, they cannot be. There's no route for them to get those, to ensure that those safety issues are addressed in the way they'd like.
Probably, yeah. As strong regulation we have, as stronger we have it, we all going to play with the same rules, and we have rules to look at it.
Those SQUID documents, those SMS documents, it's actually a key performance indicator to close those off as quickly as possible.
Yeah, well, in terms of safety management systems, one of your performance indicators is how many analysis have you performed in a time frame, and with how many of those are closed. But regardless the quality of the answer. Yeah,
because doesn't that encourage
Yeah.
a swifter, signing off, closing down of
Mhm.
safety concerns?
Yeah, we can. What we can say is, I have an issue, I analyze it, and I say something about it, and I close that report.
Without the actual safety concern being
No, it could
resolved.
be it could be taken in consideration. But I said, well, because the crew was wearing a super nice survival dry suit, the level of safety or the level of protection is acceptable for us.
Moving on to the mapping, the Euronav mapping
Mhm.
issue that the pilots complained about. There was minutes of flight safety meeting after flight safety, month after month after month. The same issue was brought up, and they were saying that this Euronav system is blurred, it's difficult to read, it's not kept up to date. you know, this is not acceptable. As us, we feel that this is not helping us in our night. You know, we have to do night flights into, you know, difficult terrain, into London. Is that a serious issue? Is that a serious safety issue for pilots, search and rescue pilots?
Bear in mind that our work is done in the middle of nowhere. So probably in that situation where you're going to a long-range mission, probably it's not very important like to have a good terrain awareness because you're in the middle of the ocean. But once you get home, or you're working, we also do rescues on the coast shore. So once you're there, you need to have a proper cartography because we're at night or without any visibility, or so we need to have a map. I don't care if it's in an electronic format, paper-wise, or in an electronic flyback, which is an iPad mainly, that is used by many operators. I mean, but I need to have a proper cartography.
So if pilots are complaining that one of the electronic map they have on board is not up to scratch, is not up to standard for them, not good for their purposes, should that be addressed?
Of course. I mean, we also are aware that there are other providers with a better quality mapping systems. Probably that could be another solution. And of course, yes, this has to be addressed somehow. I mean,
but when you hear that it's been going on it's been over a year since it was first raised, and when, as you say, navigation is such an important element of a search and rescue mission. As a pilot, what's your response to that? That hasn't been seen as a priority issue to be addressed.
There's some issues that you can address it easier than others, because you also have to rely on that package of information of the database, who should be released to the manufacturer and then put it into the aircraft. That is a long-lasting issues, but you can solve it with a iPad or with a paper charts that we've been flying for years. But of course, it has to have the proper figures and numbers there.
Okay, I don't understand what you say. What you mean by that? But like in terms of this, for months and months and months, search and rescue pilots are saying, I can't rely on that map that you have provided us with. The moving map you have provided with is not good enough for us, and it's not changed. Like, surely that if there's anything that should be a level of priority to be addressed, it should be the navigation system.
Bear in mind that some equipment on the terrain is not a primary source of navigation. So you could say that is not a top priority, because you should fly with other type of sources, of navigation sources. But of course, when you are flying with equipment approved, if you cannot rely on it, it is an issue. If you have false indications or obstacles that should be there and is not, of course that creates a big problem of reliability of the systems for pilots, that they cannot rely on that system to navigate properly.
So the fact that that issue has not been grasped and dealt with, you know, in response to these complaints, what does that tell you about the situation that search and rescue crews are in Ireland?
I mean, of course, you're flying in a not ideal conditions as well. If you cannot rely on the maps you could be in big trouble.
So this should be something that should be addressed as a matter of a priority.
No, it should be addressed, of course. I mean, if you're flying with a not updated or incorrect database, I mean, I can accept as a pilot that someone made a mistake in putting a obstacle there, but in the aeronautical sector we have means like NOTAMs that could say it is an error in database blah blah blah, and we need, and the point X, it has a different altitude that is shown in the charts. So there is means to protect ourselves from errors made in the database as well.
Okay, there's two separate issues here though. One is that they have this kind of old-fashioned neuronav system, an older system that's not that's blurry, that's not, and then there's a separate issue which is the AIP data that's supplied and then the actual maps.
But it's all connected.
Oh,
they're
all, well, it's all about your navigation being
Yeah.
not right. But I'm saying in terms of one is a kind of a commercial issue for the company in terms of how much are they going to invest in the moving map system on board their helicopters, and then the other one is another issue which we'll talk about. So first of all, the blurred map, the fact that that it's nowhere near, it's not as good as say what the UK SAR colleagues are using.
Yeah.
So is that's a commercial decision or what?
Yeah, it could be a commercial decision or provide a decision. I mean, like to have better scan or better digitalized maps or cartography. Probably is, I don't know if it's in terms of cost. There's a more costly or cheaper cartography that you can be provided with. But nevertheless, yes, I mean, you have the means. You have already the resources there to have better providers of cartography.
And if it's not provided?
Is not provided because of financial decision or equipment decision. Probably the systems do not accept a new software like the our phones, or they cannot allow another update of the software. Sometimes it could be that, and to change that software is totally very, very expensive as well.
In terms of then the other issue is the Irish Aviation Authority has just brought out a new map, an ICAO, a half-inch map, which is the ICAO one, and then there's the quarter-inch one, which is the more detailed one. And I was showing you some of the mistakes that are on that map. Contours missing, tinting colours missing, lighthouses in the wrong place, mountain spot heights missing. I mean, I'm astonished that at the number, the sheer number of mistakes we've been able to find. Are you?
Well, actually myself, I've been once in a flight that the aerodrome was in the wrong side of the river. Supposed to be in one side of the river, and it was in the other one. But we notified that. We notified to the authority, to the navigation provider, and it says, hey, this aerodrome is not in the same position that is depicted on the charts. So it is means to fix those errors. I mean, human errors is across the industry. So we have to protect ourselves from those. And there is means that you can put in the NOTAM or an advice that there is a mistakes or some mistakes in the database.
But in terms of the scale, the number of mistakes that have crept into the new maps, is that surprising for?
Well, I've never seen that many errors in the same common small area. As a matter of fact, I've never had, for example, a phantom advice or ticketing event in my cockpit, like terrain, because of a false indication. I've never had it in my life. But yeah, it's quite surprising that the amount of errors. But nevertheless, there's means to correct those.
But our information is that the Aviation Authority were told about some of these errors some time ago. They were told about the tinting errors, they were told spot heights were missing, they were told elevation values were wrong. And their response was that these are VFR maps and therefore these are not safety issues.
International Aviation Authorities, ICAO, Annex 4, says that national has the responsibility for the accuracy of the data. And Irish Aviation Authority documents, they say the same, that they are responsible to provide an accurate data to the crews and to the providers. So I think this is quite important that if they say that they have the responsibility, they fulfill with it.
But you've seen the map. Do you think that they have fulfilled that responsibility?
Let's see the next update.
This map has just been issued. And they had been made aware of, like we contacted them last July and said, Skellig Michael, which was 9 days after the Blackrock crash, they've issued a NOTAM for one of our most famous islands. There's been a Star Wars movie made there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, again, depicted at the height of the lighthouse, not the height of the island. They issued a NOTAM on that because the MEF was
Mhm.
out. They had to because of the MEF. They changed it. And then we contacted them and said, what did you do in relation to that? They said, we checked out every other coastal island. We reviewed all the islands, checked the data, and we found no other anomalies. Now, I've just shown you some anomalies. We've got one island, the most westerly Irish island,
Mhm.
which is more than twice the height of the only elevation value shown for that island. That is the same with other islands. We've showed you lighthouses off the coast which have moved location from the previous maps. So there has been no NOTAMs in relation to this. Like, where does that leave us? I mean, it just seems to me that if the Irish Aviation were told about, say, Achill Island, it has no contours, no tenting. If you're flying, you need to change in a hurry. You're looking at a white island. You're thinking that's flat. They were told about that. They were told that's not a safety concern. Do you think that's a safety concern?
Yeah, it is a safety concern. If you don't have an obstacle depicted on the chart, of course you are a VFR pilot, and we can fly VFR at night. So I'm not going to see the island. I need to have a proper charts and a proper VFR charts with as much detail as possible in order to fulfill with my safe flight. It is totally.
And it's a particular issue, isn't it, for search and rescue because of its because of the coastal amount of coastal work you do.
Well, yeah, depending on the mission that it's take place. If it takes place at 145 miles out, you're not going to be it's not going to be really an issue. But if you have to do a mission close to the shore or going to that island, it is going to be a problem. Yeah.
I think their point was it's VFR, so you're supposed to be able to see the mountain rather than, be depending on a map.
Well, or not. I mean,
but
I can
explain why that doesn't work through.
Well, of course, VFR pilots has to fulfill with a minimum meteorological conditions. And in some type of aerospace, like airspace G, with distance and control, the only requirement is to be in contact with terrain and outside clouds. So even if it's a daylight, could be foggy, high pressure fronts with haze, and I'm not going to be able to see far away. So I need to have my database as detailed as possible in order to know where I am.
And now you've seen the maps. I've shown you just a few of the errors. There's
Yeah.
many more that
Yeah.
we've been able to establish. Would you be comfortable flying with those maps?
Probably not. If I have and the thing is, if I have a phantom triggering events, for example, and they say me terrain every single time, that I know, I know they say that I have an antenna here, but it's not, so I build resistance, I build resistance to that. And if they build the antenna and then now it sounds, I will say, it's not, the antenna is not going to be there, and then I probably gonna hit it, of course.
Yeah, that's the EGPWS system
Yeah.
in particular. But forget about that system and go back to the actual
Yeah.
navigation. Cloud comes down. You're looking at a paper map
Mm-hmm.
because you've been told not to rely on the Euronav system
Yeah.
that's in your cockpit.
Of course, if the chart is not accurate, it is a safety issue. Period.
And a serious safety issue.
I mean, if we're talking about the doctors. Imagine that doctor, a surgeon, open a chest and reads an anatomy book and says you can cut here, but here is in a vein, and then you go and cut it. He says, no, my anatomy book is not correct. I mean, you're supposed to be looking at it.
Yeah, because much was made of the fact that the island that was crashed into, they couldn't understand why that. We don't know yet. We have to wait, obviously, until that report is done. But when you have islands which are depicted on a map at 276 feet, and when they are actually 660 feet at their highest point,
Black Rock was 310,
Black Rock was 310 and the
and
route
they
map, yeah.
were and they were flying at 200.
Yeah. So that something happened there. We don't know what happened there.
Mhm.
Why they were that. But you could, if you're looking at a map and you're flying around the island I just spoke about, you're looking at it. It's telling you you're flying towards a 276-foot island, and it's actually 660 feet.
Mm-hmm.
That surely for you must make your blood run cold at the thought of.
As you said, we have to wait to see the final report in order to say what that decision was made, why they took that decision, and
Sorry, forget about the Black Rock one. This is the map. I showed you a picture when we were looking at the map
Mhm.
of Inishtarracht, which is this island, which all you can see on the map is a lighthouse at 276 feet.
Mhm.
But actually, that lighthouse is on an island that is 660 feet high.
Mhm.
So if you were a search and rescue pilot flying at night time in fog maybe in that area, when you see the map telling you that and you now know what is actually in that fog, how does that make you feel? Or how would that make you feel?
I mean, again, I wasn't there. You have to understand what the crew.
Oh no,
I mean,
sorry, I'm
because,
confusing you. I don't want you to talk about Black Rock and that at all. I'm talking about the
Yeah,
fact that
but Katie, that is a very linked question.
Yeah.
Because if I'm saying I will never fly below the minimum,
Oh no, I don't mean about flying below the minimum, but I'm saying, isn't there times where you have to fly below the minimum because
I mean, what they did is to fly in the automatic approach,
yeah.
and they fly 200 feet because that's the parameters of the thing.
Uh-huh.
Of course, I need to understand what the crew, why they were flying at that altitude, if you're supposed to be a higher obstacle.
Uh-huh.
But again, there's also probably a design error in the route,
In the route, yeah, that it shouldn't have gone over that island.
because we fly the same routes.
Mm.
Well, we use the same procedures. We fly FMS routes ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and we have created points that are ours. For us, we do not create any point which is on top of any piece of land.
Mm-hmm.
We only create points in the middle of the ocean. But I don't know why they build it that way. Probably because it's a specific local.
So when you say
Local,
point, I mean waypoints.
The waypoints that we had in our FMS routes are always without being on top of any piece of land. But it is our way or our considerations. They build those FMS routes or waypoints in such manner, probably because they would like to have some piece of land in sight. Probably.
I think
I don't know.
I think
You know what I mean?
I think even in Irish terms, they're surprised. They were surprised afterwards.
But I don't know the decision, so I cannot say that it is good or it is bad. I will not say that. It was a decision-making process they did, which is totally valid.
Okay, the EGPWS system and the false alerts and the fact that BlackRock wasn't in it, the problems with the database, gaps in the databases. Is this a problem? Has it been addressed in other jurisdictions? Yes.
Yeah, is across search and rescue providers we found the same issue, and there is two problems with that: is the quality and the accuracy of the database. We find in other countries that they have similar issues, and also bear in mind that they were flying in a low altitude mode, that also disables some protection systems, which is recommended in the low altitude profiles, because the GPWS was designed in a fixed wing for guys who are flying 34,000 feet. So now when we becomes into low altitude profiles, you need to adapt those profiles to the type of flight you are.
So is that the problem? Is that the profiles, you're still in the process of developing those profiles?
No, the problem is the accuracy of the database. If I have a proper database, I can fly with enough acceptable level of safety, providing that the data is accurate.
And
It gives me the level of protection.
and has that? Sorry, I didn't catch you. Did that get sorted in other jurisdictions or no? Is this a problem across other countries as well?
Yeah, we've seen other search and rescue services across Europe has raised their hands. They say, "Well, we have the same issue. We've noticed that some islands are not here in the moving map cartography, for example." Yeah.
And if they're not in the moving map, they're probably not in the.
No, there is in the VFR charts there are, and not in the electronic ones.
How did that do we know how did that information get corrupted along the way?
I can tell I'm not that technical. I don't have that technical expertise to answer that question. Okay.
Okay. And in terms of the aviation, in terms of the preliminary report that we have had in relation to Black Rock, there was only 2 safety recommendations in that. One was the route guide needed to be reviewed, route guides, and the other was that they need to review how they're storing this antennae. I'm told that there was no immediate response from the company, from CHC Ireland in relation to that. It was pilots basically said, we're not going to fly, we're not going to do night missions over water wearing these now that we know that there is some issue with the GPS antennae. Is that acceptable that it took the pilots to actually put their hands up and say, we're not doing this? Like, should the regulator have been in a position to step in there, or should the company be required to step in once there is an actual safety recommendation from the Accident Investigation Unit?
Again, it's a preliminary report, and it's a recommendation. There is not a mandatory obligation, neither for the state, neither for the operator at this moment, to put that in place. So it's a preliminary report, and we are aware that the companies, thanks to the reports done, bear in mind that right now there is a preliminary report, and there's not a mandatory obligation for neither the state, neither to the operator, to put in place any of those recommendations at this moment. Nevertheless, we heard that thanks to the reports of the pilots, now the operator is changing, or is looking to change retrofit the life vest and changing the model, which is pretty good for us.
It does seem, though, looking at it again as a civilian looking outside, that it's placing a huge responsibility on crews themselves to press for this. And okay, they got it this time because there was a crash, there was people dead. You get it in response to that, but it does seem to have. It seems extraordinary that these issues, which are clearly safety concerns for pilots and crews, that there's no way to enforce changes to them.
Yeah. You also have to bear in mind that the aeronautical sector is a very complex and difficult one. So when you say, who is responsible for that? I mean, we have a lot of stakeholders and actors here. We have the manufacturer of the live vest, the manufacturer of the beacon, the operator, the Civil Aviation Authority, the European agency, the pilots themselves, the training departments of the company. So every one of those actors has their own part of responsibility and the part of changing things. So this is a very complex issue. You cannot say, let's going to blame the pilot because he didn't wear it properly. Why he didn't properly? Because he wasn't trained accordingly, or probably he's a lazy guy and he don't like to be familiar with his equipment, which is quite rare because his life is going to be jeopardized. But probably the training of the company, probably because of the is not a regulation, probably the manufacturer of the live vests use cheap material. It is very difficult to address or to say who is responsibility of that. But if we have a strong regulation and we have a civil aviation authority with the power, with this regulation put in place, we believe this is a way forward.
And that's simply, you have that, you've started on that road in Spain, and you have legislation, but we don't have that in Ireland, we don't have that in other European countries.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, so that's why we encourage Irish Aviation Authority to develop those regulation frameworks, and of course to the European Safety Agency.
Is is it fair to say that until those regulations are in place, until there is actual hard law legislation, that search and rescue crews are going to be more vulnerable?
We need to have a legal framework in order to raise the safety, the acceptable level of safety.
And one last question, just in relation to the mapping issue. Again, I am blown away by the fact that lighthouses are moving on that map, that there's mountains, that there's no indication of how high they are, that there's islands that look like they're flat when in fact they have mountains on them. Is that unusual? To have that scale of errors on a brand new map in 2017, when there must have been alerts to these things. You know, there's a lot of people who are encouraged to contact the aviation authority.
Well, the thing is, I cannot tell how many errors exactly they are, how many, if there is other agencies across Europe who have the same issues. I don't know if it's a problem of a software or a punctual error or mistake that is somehow was the data corrupted. I cannot tell you in a technical way. What I can tell you is that we've faced with map errors before, and again, there is means to protect crews from those errors in the aeronautical sector right now.
And the idea that they're VFR maps, that these issues do not compromise the safety of any VFR flight operation?
No, we need to have as more accurate VFR chart as possible. That's period. I mean, it's like IFR flights. Imagine like radio stations where the big airlines fly with. Imagine that they put it 5 miles away from the runway. It's the same thing. I mean, it doesn't matter for us to see. No, you have to be in contact with the terrain. And what happens if the meteorological conditions of the sun is a haze? Well, it could be a fire. It could be a fire. It could be a volcano thing that creates some kind of a low visibility that I will not be able to see an obstacle.
So in that case, you're obviously, all you have to rely on is the map.
Yep.
And if that map is not accurate,
It is a safety issue.